I want to do a little side-by-side comparison here of these two coffee grinders. The one on the left is the Mr. Coffee burr grinder, and the one on the right, I don't know my left from my right, give me a break here. The one on the right is a Cuisinart DBM-8, I think it's called. Anyway, the Mr. Coffee we've had for maybe 3 years. I don't know exactly when we got it, but probably 4 or 5 months ago it started acting up where it wouldn't run the full cycle, and it got to the point where you push the button and it would just pulse, run for maybe a second and stop, and you had to push the button 5 or 6 times before it finally kicked in and actually ground the amount of coffee that you wanted. And then a week or so ago it just quit working completely. So durability wise, it only lasted 2-3 years. I guess I really don't know how long it lasted. So that being said, less than $40 to buy the thing. So, you know, in this age of disposables, in this disposable world that we live in, you can't really expect things to last much longer than a couple of years. So yeah, there's Mr. Coffee, and this is the Cuisinart. They're both very similar, and as far as the unboxing itself was concerned, my initial impression when I unboxed the Cuisinart, this one here, was that it just didn't seem to be as sturdy and as well built. So if I had to base my opinion strictly on the unboxing, I would give the edge to the Mr. Coffee. After having used it, I'm not sure I would do that at this point. Okay, so here's the way the thing works. Down there you've got one of the grinding surfaces there, and then the other grinding surface on the bottom of the thing here. And how far you screw this thing in depends on how coarse or how fine the grind of coffee is. This is going to really look bad. And, you know, disclaimer here, and this is the first time I've ever tried to do anything like this, so it's probably going to look like crap, and it'll probably look so bad I won't even want to publish it. But anyway, why use a grinder? Why grind your own coffee? I like to make my coffee using either the stovetop percolator, which you see on the right, and if I'm just making a single cup of coffee, I might use the French press, that little gizmo on the left side of the stove. If you're using a percolator, stovetop percolator, or if you're using a French press, you want to use coarsely ground coffee. Okay, not the medium grind that comes in a store, the pre-ground stuff or the fine grind stuff. You want coarse ground coffee, otherwise you're going to have a cup of mud. So that's the reason for doing that. Now, like I said, if I had to judge base my opinion strictly on the unboxing, I might have given the edge to the Mr. Coffee. However, after having used it, and I've used the Cuisinart for 2 mornings now, yesterday and today, the Cuisinart does not make quite as much noise. It's not as loud, and these things are loud. That's just no way. I'm not going to get around. They make a lot of noise. Okay. If you live in an apartment with thin walls, you're going to wake your neighbors up if you make a 5 o'clock pot of coffee. That's their problem. And the other thing is, when you grind your own coffee, you're going to end up with a certain amount of coffee dust. The real fine, powdery stuff that just kind of blows away. Not a lot. With the Mr. Coffee, when I'd grind enough for making a quart of coffee, which is generally what we do, about 36 ounces of coffee, 36 ounces, we would have maybe a half a teaspoon of powder. I think the Cuisinart does not make as much powder, so you get less of the really fine powdery stuff, and it's quieter. What I don't like about the Cuisinart, this is the Mr. Coffee, and this is the thing here, the dial that you adjust to determine how much coffee you're going to grind. A little rotary switch here. the Cuisinart, and I don't know if you can see it here, the lighting's not great, but it's got a little slide thing here, and maybe I can get in closer. Yeah, that looks better. It's got several notches here, and you know, so there's just 2 of us in the household, so generally use about 8 scoops of coffee. The thing about the Mr. Coffee that I liked is that the scoop, a little convenient holder here. Whoops, how about that? Try and do this with one hand. And there's a nice little place to store your coffee scooper. The Cuisinart doesn't have any place to put it. So the brush itself, a little bit different, but you just have to find your own place to keep that. The scoop is a little bit bigger, so it's a little bit different size. Both of the scoops have the little cleaning brush on the end here. And actually, I found that this bin was a little bit thicker, heavier material than this one. But this one's a lot easier to clean. Let me show you why that is. On the bottom side of this, you got all these bends and corners, and the coffee just sort of, let me see if I can do it this way. You know, the coffee just kind of gets all into the nooks and crannies here, and it's kind of hard to clean out. This one, not so much. Just wipe it off with a paper towel or something, and it's clean. It's good to go. So, yeah, that's how it works. You adjust your grind by, again, this would be all the way in. It'd be the fine grind coffee, and then there's probably, I think, 18 clicks. And if you come all the way out here, you get extra coarse coffee, and wherever you want in between. So I'm going to put this on pause, and I'm going to go ahead and plug that Cuisinart in and start it up, and just let you see what it sounds like, and how long it takes to grind a certain amount of coffee. So let's go ahead and pause this. Okay, we are back in the record mode. As you can see, we've got the Keurig type coffee maker here too, and that's ideal if you're only going to make 1 cup of coffee and you're in a hurry. The downside with using the percolator, you got to wait till a coffee boils. It takes 5 or 6 minutes to get up to a boiling temperature, and then you got to perk it for 5, 6, 7 minutes, depending on the grind of coffee and how long you want to grind it for, or brew it for. The French press thingy, you got to boil the water, or at least heat the water to temperature, and then, you know, you pour the water in there over your grounds, and then you let that brew for another 5 minutes. So yeah, it's time consuming, where with your and this is not a Keurig, it's a Hamilton Beach, which I like better than a Keurig actually. Half the price, and the water comes out hotter. It makes a better cup of coffee, but that's just my opinion. Okay, so this thing's plugged in. I think I've got it set for like 4 tablespoons. This is what it sounds like. Yeah, you're loud, huh? Okay. So I didn't time it. I didn't say how long that took, but yeah, that's what it sounds like. Then the grind themselves, you know, they both have a real consistent grind. I'm not disappointed at all with that. You can't really see here, and I'm not going to try and make it work. So anyway, I like fresh ground coffee. It does make a difference as far as the taste of the coffee is concerned. I bought the percolator, the stovetop percolator you see here. The reason I bought that initially is because I like to go camping, and sometimes there's no electricity in the campgrounds or wherever you decide to camp. But I tried it out, use it at home just to see how it worked, and the truth is it's never been out of the house. That coffee was so good on a stovetop percolator, so much different than the other methods of brewing that we were using. That we use it every day. And I'm retired. I'm not in a big hurry. I've got 10-15 minutes to spare in the morning to make my pot of coffee, and to me it's worth it. So anyway, that's the Cuisinart coffee grinder and the Mr. Coffee maker. We'll see if the Cuisinart lasts a little longer than the Mr. Coffee. Price-wise, they're both very close in price. The Cuisinart was actually on Amazon a couple of dollars cheaper than the Mr. Coffee, although the reviews that I read, when I read a couple of comparison reviews, the 5 best coffee makers, the whatever, or coffee grinders, and they all indicated that the Cuisinart was going to be a little more expensive than the Mr. Coffee. And the Mr. Coffee was the hands-down winner of these reviews when it came to price and performance. Then when the Cuisinart was a little bit cheaper than the Mr. Coffee, that's why I went with it. So either one of them I think are fine. I don't think you're going to be disappointed with either one. The biggest problem is going to be the noise factor. I have a roommate here, and she might get up before I do, or I might get up before she does, and run the coffee maker, or run the coffee grinder that makes so much noise when somebody else is sleeping upstairs. It might be a problem, but it's a problem that hasn't been terrible. So anyway, but that's the downside of these things. Anyway, that's my review, and this is probably way too long, but we'll just call it quits. And hey, thanks for watching. If you've bothered to watch, why would you? I don't know.